Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Title IX Consulting Group's Title IX Insider. Today, we're going to be discussing some very important topics that have really hit the mainstream media and politics, education in particular. And Nandini, I'll go ahead and just give you the floor to open up the conversation.
Thank you, Dr. Sandi. Yesterday, a new executive order was signed titled Improving Education Outcomes by Empowering Parents, States, and Communities. According to the official release from the White House, the intent behind this order is to decentralize education by shifting control away from the federal government back to the states and communities. The US Department of Education echoed this framing in their official statement, describing it as a return of a decision making process back to the parents, teachers, local communities, basically everyone who's the closest to the students and the classrooms. And while the language of the executive order focuses on empowerment and local autonomy, the implications from like pieces that have come out, news items, seems to be much broader. The Guardian reported that this order sets in motion a process that could ultimately dismantle the US Department of Education, and the piece describes it as a restructuring effort that aligns with ongoing political goals to reduce federal oversight in education. Even education groups are responding. So I saw a statement from the National Education Association, which published a statement basically outlining how such a move could harm students, particularly those who are considered vulnerable or most in need of protection and resources. And according to their analysis, without federal safeguards, students with disability, students of color, LGBTQ plus youth, English learners, and others have historically relied on these civil rights in schools. And without them, they foresee it that they could be left as vulnerable and unprotected. And they're also emphasizing that the Department of Education plays a critical role in upholding equity and ensuring that students aren't left behind on the basis of where they live or which school they attend. And even on social media, I think specifically Instagram, I saw a lot of reactions, but they were very different from like these like analytical or critical like think pieces. It was more emotional and direct. And I think one of the posts I saw was basically a concern about, and it was drawing a connection between the executive order and the possible long term goal of weakening access to public education. And a lot of comments under it seem to be people who are worried about their kids attending like public schools. And I think with all of this, what I saw like coming up as a question the most was like, what is the role of the federal government in imparting education then? And more importantly, also, who stands to gain or lose when and if the Department of Education fully gets dismantled? And Dr. Sandi, as someone who's deeply engaged in civil rights and their protection in educational spaces, how do you interpret the intent and likely impact of this executive order? And is there something that students, families, teachers, institutions should be thinking about, keeping in mind as considerations moving forward?
Well, thank you so much, Nandini. That was a very good description, and it's a very difficult conversation, mainly because there are so many nuances within that specific area of dismantling the Department of Education. When I hear what you're describing, I'm hearing multiple debates that are kind of being conjoined. Um, First and foremost, the vulnerable populations. It appears from what the Trump administration and from what President Trump stated yesterday right before he signed it is that the Title I, the special education, and the Pell Grants are going to stay intact, and they're going to simply be removed from where they are being overseen, given to the states, but their funding and their purpose is not going to change. That appears that it's going to remain intact. And so from from my bird's eye view, that is a very positive thing that should decrease some of the stressors of the individuals that you're describing and talking about. When we begin to discuss the protections afforded to vulnerable groups under civil rights, especially under the Office of Civil Rights that has been placed under the Department of Education, that is where the concern comes for those of us that do civil rights work, Title IX work, because we don't know exactly what will happen when there are complaints that come forward, when there is discrimination, let's say for someone that has a disability or for someone that has been sexually harassed. What are the options for them to ensure that there's a correction within that institution or that school? Typically in the past, your options have always been you file a lawsuit and then you kind of deal with the court system in order to have some sort of correction and or some sort of damages, meaning monetary compensation for what you've suffered, or you go through the Office of Civil Rights under the Department of Education, where the Office of Civil Rights would then either decide to investigate that school or higher education campus or decide not to. But many times when they do investigate or when they have investigated cases, what they're doing is going in to ensure that the schools make some sort of changes. They're looking to see if the schools have not been compliant with what they're supposed to do for students and for the employees at that school. And then they're kind of giving that oversight and they're giving the details as to what the schools need to do to change in order to improve. And that way they can decrease their liability. In a lot of ways, OCR was there to help inform the schools to avoid lawsuits and in order to improve at the exact same time. So when we discuss the safeguards for the vulnerable groups, I think my concern primarily focuses on where is the Office of Civil Rights going to be? It's already been cut dramatically. Many individuals have been fired. Entire offices have been shut down, like in New York and Boston, for example. And so all of those cases are now in limbo. We don't know what's happening with those specific cases that have already been ongoing, that are supposed to be investigated and looked into in order to protect those individuals. So what's going to happen with the Office of Civil Rights? We don't know. I think that is where there should still be concern. There has been no mention of a plan of what will happen with cases of discrimination of any sort, whether it's disability, whether it's an IEP, special education, sexual harassment, sexual assault, any kind of discrimination that someone might be undergoing within a school. Where do those go? Is there still going to be an option for some sort of accountability? And previously, the accountability coming from the government was useful and helpful, mainly because you don't want to go to the state itself and say, hey, this school in your state is doing things wrong. They're not doing things by the book. Many times the states are the ones that are protecting the schools and or the universities. And so they have a vested interest to make sure that those schools and universities do not look bad or that they're not in the public eye. And so that's why OCR being under the branch of the Department of Education, mainly because they are part of the government and federal regulation, was a positive thing. Does it have to be under the Department of Education? No, it does not. It can definitely be under, let's say, the Department of Justice, and that would probably make a lot of sense. Or Homeland Security. It could also be situated there. So the Office of Civil Rights can be situated in other areas such as the Department of Justice or even Homeland Security. And those areas would make sense. I've always stated in the past, prior to all of this Department of Education dismantling conversation, that the Office of Civil Rights always has needed to have more teeth in the game in order to ensure that schools and campuses are limiting the discrimination that they do. Many times, for example, last year's fine against Liberty University was about $14 million. But when you have a campus that has an endowment of almost, of over $1 billion, that's just a slap on the wrist. That is not major. And so we need to have more enforcement, and there needs to be a little bit more, like there should be a lot more to support the Office of Civil Rights to correct campuses and schools from making the mistakes of discrimination against individuals. Because when that happens, it is very scarring to individuals. It is very egregious at times. And so you do want an entity that can correct behavior and do so in a powerful way.
Given that you've said, like, there is going to be uncertainty, and even like people in the field don't know like what's going to happen, where the current cases are going to go, who's going to handle it, how to toe the line of like states having vested interests versus states now being in charge of these things. Is there something students, families, administrators, teachers, something they should keep in mind? I don't know, maybe a way or I don't know, resource or a tool, something, some way they know how to navigate this uncertainty? Because I'm guessing a lot is going to change even at school levels if the Office of Civil Rights does end up going to like the Department of Justice or Homeland Security in the case of Department of Education getting dismantled.
I think for students and for families that are looking for justice, if they've experienced some sort of discrimination, I think contacting companies like Title IX Consulting Group will be helpful because we can steer them in the right direction of who to speak to and who to contact for next steps. So, for example, we might be able to connect them to a law firm that we've worked closely with as expert witnesses on lawsuits, or we might connect them with some sort of resources that we can provide in-house. Outside of that, I think individuals should always keep in mind that yes, lawsuits can be very draining. They can take up a lot of energy, a lot of time. Lawsuits many times don't have a result for about 2 to 3 years. And so it is something that individuals, I think, don't necessarily understand or know at all times because we don't all do lawsuits, obviously. Um, but when there are limited options, let's just say that the Office of Civil Rights closes down completely and there is no government option, um, and it results in leaving us only with the lawsuit option, that would be very devastating because I think it's always served a positive purpose to have the Office of Civil Rights and then the branch of the court system both as possible options for individuals. I think that's always been a positive thing. I've always felt there should be even more options for individuals, not just two. But if you cut away one of them and you only leave lawsuits, I think that is detrimental. I think that is catastrophic for victims and families. But like you asked, what could they do now at this moment as things are being cut in half and, options are being limited? Um, I would say to contact us, Title IX Consulting Group, or any other group that you feel comfortable with in order to look for the resources and options that are still available to you. And if that means it's a lawsuit, I would advise and say, don't be afraid, be strong. And yes, it will be impactful. Yes, it does take a toll. But if you have the strength to fight back and you have the strength to know that you have really solid footing to make a change, get with a team of lawyers, get with a team of Title IX Consulting, get with a team of experts that will help guide you and be by your side to push this forward. Um, and again, it's not ideal that the Office of Civil Rights has been chopped down the way it has. I think it's a big disservice to students and families around the country. And my hope is that the Trump administration will recognize that the Office of Civil Rights is an important entity for the protection of students and employees, and that there are vulnerable populations that truly do need federal oversight to come in and help make changes at campuses and at schools.
Thank you, Dr. Sandy. Do you think it will be an ongoing discussion as we see this unfold, that depending on what happens, we're gonna all have to like together come up with solutions, support each other in the community to navigate it through? Because if things that haven't happened before are happening, then do we come up with innovative ways, or like we recognize the changes and we come together as a community to move forward, kind of a thing?
I'm not quite sure what all of this means or what the options are going to be. Um, I think there will be a lot of conversations and dialogue. I think that the need for having more than one option when there is a disservice, especially in the education system, is going to be something that's not going to go away. That conversation piece is going to be very strong amongst those of us that work in this area and this field, because of the fact that we know that when someone's assaulted or when someone goes through some sort of discrimination, only 10% of those individuals come forward. So it's a very limited number of individuals. And that was because you have these limited options. You start chiseling away at that, you're going to get this chilling effect where individuals are going to stop coming forward altogether because they're not going to trust in any system to help them. And I think that's my biggest concern, which is why I say, as much as I know it's difficult, look for the teams that you can trust to be by your side in order to push forward, even if it's with a lawsuit, even if it's something that you're thinking to yourself, I would have rather gone through the OCR, let them investigate, let them handle it so that I can have my hands away from it and just kind of be on the outside, looking in. With the lawsuit, you have to be a little bit more involved. But again, trusting your legal team, trusting your legal team, trusting the experts that are on your case to help guide and support you will be very advantageous and very important at this time for individuals. So, although I don't have the answers or solutions, at the moment, because we're all kind of waiting to see exactly what the Trump administration is going to do and say. I don't think any of us truly know what they're about to do and say, um, as we await, and if you're going through some sort of discrimination, please know that there are organizations like us that are available.
Thank you, Dr. Sandy.